Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. Well, the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race, is well underway. The deadline has passed for membership sign-ups, and all we seem to know so far, because we don't have a final figure, is that a few 100,000 people will be eligible to select their leader of the opposition government. Now, this is an important contest on which to pay attention. The winner could very well become the next Prime Minister of Canada. So just how will the race shape up? Who is in and who is out? Who stands out from the pack? And when will the victor be declared? Joining me now to share their insights are former elections lawyer and former executive director of the Conservative Party of Canada, Mike Donison, as well as lawyer Michelle Simard, who is also a Conservative and a frequent guest on our program. Mike, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we need a bit of a refresher. It's been several months since we've kind of covered the race, the contest. Mike, where do we stand in the contest right now? What are the next steps? When was the membership cutoff? Can you give us a little bit of the Coles notes, if you will, on how that race is shaping up?
Well, as you said, Tanya, quite correctly, we're in the next stage. The cutoff for memberships was June 3rd, right? So the party is now in the process of going through these membership lists and the candidates going through them and challenging them, right? Because they have to go through to make sure they vet them. And there's a process going on right now. And there's a bit of a dispute going on because if you look at the rules, all the rules say is that sometime after June 3rd, the chief returning officer must give a preliminary list to all the candidates. Doesn't give a date.
Wow.
But the ultimate date is July 29th. By July 29th, the final voters list, certified final list, has to be prepared and given to all the candidates. So we're now in this period where the candidates are starting demanding the lists and wanting to go through them and vetting them. And there's a challenge process. So that's what the party's doing right now.
Okay, so Michelle, why is the access to the voters list so important for candidates?
Oh, because frankly, they need to touch base with their the people within the base, and the only way they can do that is they need the voter list because they need confirmed. As you know, like we all get spam, we all get lots of email, sometimes legitimately, sometimes not legitimately. So at the end of the day, it's like we need a confirmed voter list. So this way we know that these people actually signed up and they actually want to be part of this voting process. And if they don't, that's fine. But every leadership candidate needs to know that this person signed up and they're willing to vote. So what the issue is right now is, will you vote for me, right? Like everybody's vying for votes. Even if they signed up votes, doesn't mean that person's going to vote for them.
That's a good point. And people need to be communicated to by the persons running. A lot of digital campaigning still going on in this post-COVID world. Mike Donison, you mentioned that there are challenges to some of the lists, like that candidates can challenge the memberships of certain signups. What does that mean? And again, assume that our audience doesn't understand the inside baseball of how a leadership contest works. And I do want to educate our viewers. So what does that mean to make a challenge to the membership?
Well, two things. A candidate's campaign can look at the list and think that there's a certain individual that isn't eligible. Perhaps your name is chosen twice, or they think they've registered someone and their name isn't showing up. And there is a process where it's a written challenge and you go to the chief returning officer who's been appointed by LEOC, and that person decides, whether the person stays on the list or is added. And there is an appeal. There's this terrible thing called the Dispute Resolution Appeals Committee. And they're a committee of LEOC, and any decision that the CRO makes that the candidate doesn't like, they can appeal to them, but they must appeal within 24 hours of the CRO making the decision. They've only got 24 hours. So if the chief returning officer says, I'm disallowing those names, and you think they should be on there, or vice versa, the campaign has 24 hours. So we could be in this process for the next 6 weeks where candidates are starting to get the list, starting to go through them, and starting to make complaints to the CRO. And that'll be totally sort of internal party process.
For those who may have signed up and they had an old voting list, and then now they move to a different riding. Mm-hmm. So once they're approved, they have a certain amount of time to tell the CRO, saying this is a different, and why is that important? Why is it important what riding they're in? Because every riding has a certain amount of points that are given. And so it does make a difference of where somebody is a person who can vote. And for smaller ridings, it makes a huge difference. For bigger ridings, probably not. But for the small ones, it does. So yes, for anybody else who might have been in a different region, they need to know that you can go to a different spot.
Okay. We got to cut to commercial break, but I'll come right back to you, Mike, in just a few moments.
Okay.
Welcome back. We're discussing the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. And again, the victor of this contest could very well become the next Prime Minister of Canada. And joining me again is Mike Donison and Michelle Simard. Mike, I don't want to belabor the point about memberships, but, I think many Conservatives or even Canadians want to know who gets to vote, who's allowed to vote. Well, it's a paid member. Well, how many members are permitted to vote in this leadership contest? Could you fill us in on some of the numbers that you think they might be?
Well, as we said earlier, the final list hasn't been put out by the CRO, but there's talk about up to 600,000, north of 600,000. Now, the trouble is some of these candidates are exaggerating. I went through each of their, Mr. Polev's and Mr. Brown's, and if you look at the base, it looks to me like if they're all telling the truth, they might not be, but if they're all telling the truth, we're looking at maybe close to 700,000. I can't believe that for a moment. Because if you take the last two elections, the one for elected Andrew Scheer and then the one last time, there were about 250,000 paid up, 250, 260 in each of those races. And of that, only about 50 to 60% voted anyway. So if these people are right, then the party is going to have to process, and we can talk about that in a minute, between now and the vote, a lot more ballots, like 2 or 3 times as many ballots as in the last.
Yeah, I was surprised because I saw that 600,000 figure, doing the math, and I was really shocked at that figure. And, great if they managed to sign up all these people. I don't buy it. I don't know, Michelle, what's your comment on this?
Yeah, honestly, I don't buy it either. I think it's just more, self-aggrandizing. I don't know the best way to say it. It's like, I signed up this many people. Like, I think I read all the candidates' emails, not every single one, but most of them. And I remember Patrick Brown saying, like, I signed up the most amount of people, over 150,000. And then Sheree's camp was just like, we signed up an unprecedented amount. And then he didn't give a number, but we signed up an unprecedented, which I'm okay with that line, unprecedented. But then you had Poliev, and it's like, we signed the most in the history of the entire party. We signed over 300,000. I'm sitting there going like, seriously? I'm like, how is that possible? And I'm like, and again, what I'm really frustrated, and I think is what most electorates are frustrated about, is how are you making these comments without any form of accountability? You make that comment when Leoc has said, this is it, but they're just making these comments. And for some, that's good enough for them to vote for somebody. But like, again, then we get into misinformation. And at the end of the day, the one thing I want from the Conservative Party is this: we are not the party of misinformation. We are the party of, we give good information, and we are willing to govern, and we govern fairly and accordingly with nothing else.
Okay, fair points there. I tend to agree with most of what you said. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the candidates running. You brought up a couple names there. To me, the perceived front runners, and I could be wrong, but they seem to be Charest on one side and Pierre Poilievre on the other side. Mike, is that a fair assessment? Does that seem like the two frontrunners there?
I think it seems that way. Some people I've spoken to are quite close to several of the campaigns. Mr. Brown is very good. He may be exaggerating, but his people are very good at signing up.
Yes.
If you look at his past record, he's excellent at it, and in particular communities. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Mr. Brown and Poliev in the last count. It wouldn't surprise me if Mr. Charest does not, he might not quite make it, because I think the reason Charest's people are giving no numbers is I could be wrong, I don't think they've had the numbers sign up.
Okay, Michelle, you're gasping. Chime in there.
Now, I'm gasping for this. If you look at some of the media, and again, it's mainstream media and some of the comments, and like everybody's put each candidate in a little category. Again, not fair, but at the end of the day. And one of the categories for Mr. Charest is that he's the statesman, okay? And my point is this. Yes, he's not giving numbers, but why would he? I mean, Peter MacKay did that, and then what ended up happening anyways? So I think they're learning from past mistakes here, where it's just like, it's no need to do that. And at the end of the day, do I feel that some candidates can do better? Yes, they can. But do you need to give their numbers up? Because I feel like giving numbers up is a boasting party. And going back to Mr. Patrick Brown, let me be very clear about this. He's the mayor of Brampton, and he just had another child. And maybe he should focus on his family and being the mayor. So at the end of the day, good for you. You want to be a leader, but you know what? Let others who actually have a little bit more experience and know what they're doing.
Wow, those are some tough words, Michelle. I mean, people would have said the same thing when I ran for Ontario PC Party, that I should have just, stayed home with my 4 kids and maybe not run. But I know that I'm quite adept at multitasking. But you bring up some fair points. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the potential or alleged irregularities with the signups in just a few moments when we return in just a moment. Welcome back. We're discussing the Conservative Party of Canada leadership contest. And again, the victor of this contest may very well become the next Prime Minister of Canada. So it is imperative and important to pay attention to these leadership contests. I would love to do a candidate by candidate analysis to see where they're kind of are at. Why don't we talk first? One name that we haven't discussed yet so far is Roman Baber. Why don't we bring up Roman Baber? An Ontario member of provincial parliament, or was, because we just had the election, so he didn't seek re-election there. Michelle, why don't I start with you? What are your thoughts of his chances, or what kind of impact he's making on this contest?
So again, full degree of separation here, of hands off. Whereas, I have known Roman since my university days, and so I've been friends with him for quite some time. So my opinion is slightly skewed, but I don't believe that Roman will have a chance of winning. But I do believe that this particular leadership race has totally changed the image that some people had of him. What he was labeled by the provincial party, I think has now changed. I think he's done an excellent job with his team to show that he's just not some renegade or outsider, that he's I actually have valid points, and I think it's done a great job for him. So whether he wins or not, this leadership election has given an opportunity for him to change his image, and that's for the better, because we'll see more of Roman later on.
Mike, any comments on the Baber campaign?
No, I basically agree with that. I think it's always an expectations game, and he's performed quite well. Yeah. But if I was in the prediction game, I think the only issue will be whether he or Mr. Acheson come last.
Yeah. And I think out of all the candidates, and I'll say this to his credit, and I have interviewed Mr. Baber before on this program, is out of the entire field of candidates, I believe he has the most integrity on the lockdown freedom advocacy file. Some of them came late to the file, once the convoy rolled in. But, Roman Baber in Ontario was known as one who paid the price by losing his caucus position for speaking against the lockdowns. And, I think he has the most integrity on that issue of the whole field. But let's switch gears. And I think that there are many Canadians who would be pleased to have that message from him alone. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. You mentioned Scott Acheson. Again, someone that maybe not many Canadians have heard about. I believe he's the member of parliament for Parry Sound, Muskoka. Mike, any predictions on Scott's campaign?
No, he hasn't particularly underperformed or overperformed. I think he has a very kindly, nice message. It's a little out of sync with the tone of the campaign. I just don't think he's going to get, unfortunately for him, too much traction. I think the issue, again, will be whether he's 6th or 5th.
Michelle?
Yeah, he's a moderate, and he's doing a really good job of trying to bridge the party. But at the end of the day, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's important to mention. In leadership contests, you're really trying to differentiate yourself from your opponent amongst party insiders, against people who are actually paid up members of the party. So they really want to see, and it's kind of like being seen as you're testing the mettle to see how you'll perform in a general. So I do feel that he's come across in a very dignified way, but I don't know if that's enough if during in general.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Leslyn Lewis. Leslyn Lewis, again, she ran in the previous leadership contest in 2020. She actually won the popular vote once Derek Sloan dropped off the ballot. How do you anticipate she will fare in this election, Michelle?
I think she's going to do pretty good. I think she's going to get the fair share of people that she had before, but I don't think she's going to make any grounds. I think it's going to be the same type of people, and she's going to do a good showing, which is great because she's the only female candidate and of one of ethnic diversity. So I think that's really good for the Conservative Party. But yeah, she's not going to make any grounds. But it's okay because sometimes we need to show that we have diversity, and I think that's a good thing.
Mike, Michelle mentioned, and I could follow up with her, but I'll let you have it. The same type of voter that voted last time. Is this the social conservative voter? Is that what she's referring to, you think?
I think that's what she's talking about. I think, Leslyn, I don't think she's performed as well as she did last time. I think she's underperformed a little. I think the much more important issue, we can talk about it later, is not her first votes. It's going to be her second preferences. The people who vote for her as their first choice, where are their seconds going to go on the subsequent counts? That could be quite significant.
Okay, and you know what? We will discuss that. We have one more segment before the end of the show. So after this commercial break, we'll talk about that. I'll make a comment on Leslyn Lewis. She is the only social conservative candidate really running. Last time there were two, now there's only the one. That could be both a pro and a con. She can clearly gather that space. However, like you mentioned, she may not benefit from another social conservative's down ballot support. So we'll have to see. We're going to cut to commercial. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're wrapping up our discussion on the federal Conservative leadership contest. What about Patrick Brown's campaign, where we have still big candidates to get through? So Patrick Brown's campaign, how do you think he's faring? I know there have been allegations of some irregularities with his membership sign-up. Mike, what do you anticipate from that campaign? Well,
he's run a pretty vicious and vindictive campaign, particularly against Mr. Poilievre. Pretty nasty stuff. I think from what I'm told, he's probably doing good on the signups. He's run a pretty strong campaign. And as I say, I think the issue is going to be, I think it's debatable whether he or Mr. Charest are on the final round with Pierre. I think Charest will make it to the round, but Brown could be close. Brown could be close to Charest.
Michelle, you've commented on the Charest campaign before. How do you feel he's done? And do you feel that there's merit to what Mike is saying, that perhaps Patrick Brown could eclipse Charest?
No, he's not going to eclipse him. At the end of the day, I think we have a very educated and well-informed conservative base. And I think that anybody who looks at it is going to be like, yes, you have Patrick Brown. He's mayor. That's fine. And I'm sitting there going like, but why not get somebody who's seasoned, who's been there and done that, who actually has a fantastic job right now and is leaving that fantastic job to run for the Conservative leadership, which frankly, he doesn't need to because he's close to retirement and makes very good money. Why is he doing it? Because for him, it's not about career anymore. It's not about trying to leave a legacy because God knows he can just enjoy his life. It's about Canada needs a real leader, somebody who can carry us because God knows we need help in this country. And the only one I believe that can do it is Charest. Because I'm very pragmatic. We are all idealistic in some ways, but we've had 3 idealistic elections and we've not got a leader that can get elected. So I think that Charest can carry the base.
So some people might push back and say, well, that's where Pierre Poilievre would come in. Poilievre, he's been vocal on these issues, leading on lots of these issues from within the House of Commons for the last few years, even when he was in the O'Toole government or the O'Toole opposition. Mike, what do you think Pierre Poilievre's? I think everybody knows or expects that he will be on that final ballot.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on his campaign, Mike, and how would that fare vis-a-vis Charest?
Well, I think I agree in part with what Michelle said. I think the Conservative Party really has to ask itself, assuming this comes down to Charest, right,
yeah,
and Poilievre, and it certainly looks that way. I was just suggesting an outlier, a possibility Brown. I think that the real issue is I don't disagree with a lot of things she said about Mr. Charest. Here's the problem. Mr. Poilievre has the best chance of winning the party base and winning the party election. I think Mr. Charest is far more electable outside the party.
Exactly.
So in a general election, like when it's Liberals versus NDP and Conservatives.
The argument on the other side I hear, not just from social conservatives, is Charest, and all the things that Michelle said are correct, but it's kind of back to the future. It's back to the old PC party. And there's also a strong sense that if Mr. Charest could become the leader of the party, he'd be very able and wins a general election, even with the majority, a lot of conservatives say to me, there'd be no difference in public policy in this country. There'd be no substantive difference in public policy except on the margins. And that is what conservatives have to ask themselves. If the name of the game is office and power and winning, which is what the Liberal game is, then Charest's your guy, no question. But then don't have any illusions that substantive public policy, social, economic, or political, will be that different on the NDP Liberal trend line. And that's fine. And I think that's the decision for intelligent conservatives to decide. And that's why I think it's Poilievre on the one side of that argument, but it's Charest on the other. And I think that's the fundamental issue. The party has to ask itself, what are we all about? What is this game all about?
That's very well described, because don't forget, this current iteration of the Conservative Party is a merger of two parties, almost the West, if you will, and the PC party. And you're right. I think Pierre and Charest represent both those wings. Michelle, do you have a final thought? We only have 10 seconds left.
I do. Poilievre has gone through a different echelon. I can call it an echelon because now he's talking about firing the Bank of Canada governor and getting Bitcoin. And I'm sitting there going like, I know you're doing this to get voters, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense. And so for me is this, I'll run the next time, but it'll only be if Charest is leader because I'm a pragmatist. And at the end of the day, I am tired of sitting and complaining. I just want to let's just do and cut taxes and make Canadians actually afford to buy food and pay their bills. That's it.
Okay, on that note, I'll leave it be. Thank you both so much. We'll pick this up probably in a month's time and get an update from you both. Thank you. And that's all for Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.